so that's good. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, everybody. I reached over and I gently moved my mic just a little bit, and apparently it just lost the connection. So I'm gonna sit here and try not to touch my cables again because I couldn't find it anymore. So thank you all you for finding us back. But yeah,
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Thanks for joining, and I'm sure they'll all roll in, so that's great.
they'll
That's
find us
great.
one way or another because we're here. And but yeah, I wanted to say, I wanted to thank you that talk you were given the other day. I don't even remember if I catch what was the name of it. I guess go ahead and say.
So yeah, so I've been doing this started first with a moment where I was really worried about the regime kind of really stealing the moment. So I engaged in a people's filibuster, and that was a couple weeks ago, where I read the entirety of Peter Ackerman's The Checklist to End Tyranny, which is free on the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict. So I thought, let's do a live reading group, like a story time, sort of for adults who are trying to figure out how to enter the situation. And then I noticed, and this makes sense. So we saw the escalation of violence in the streets. And I do believe that fascists are trying to provoke us into the streets for violence and shooting a woman in the face and pulling, women and vulnerable gas, throwing tear gas at babies. All of those things are intentional. I think that they are a move to try to get us to agree to their terms of engagement, to trap us in a battlefield wherein we are uh, going to lose because these people have drones and spyware, and it is. I think sometimes people do not understand the risk of white Christian nationalists. I think they think, oh, it's just Christians with spicy views, but actually, white Christian nationalists are they've been identified in the before times by people in our federal government as the most dangerous group and threat to democracy. And part of the reason for that is they really want to kill us. And so I have studied them for 2 decades. So I noticed that people who are voices that have been on the pro democracy side, who were starting to feel very angry, were talking about, well, maybe violence is the right response. And I was like, oh my god, because this is exactly what they want. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to return to the reading group. And I came back with Gene Sharp's book, which is, I know I'm saying so many words, friends. Gene Sharp's civilian defense book. I think it's called Civilian Defense. Anyway, it's free on the Albert Einstein Institution. And I am somebody who's taken who has not only studied community organizing for 20 years, but who has taken training with the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict and a subsidiary of the Albert Einstein Institution. And so I thought, you know what? Let's just do another story time to explain what nonviolence, like strategic nonviolence is, because a lot of people assume that nonviolence is about peacekeeping and not peacekeeping, about passivity, right? And just kind of like sweet vibes, and that we're trying to appeal to other people's hearts. But that's not what strategic nonviolence is. It's actually also a weapon of war, but it's understanding that you can't be pulled onto a battlefield in which you are outnumbered and outgunned, right?
Mhm.
And that you have to understand all of your available means of resistance and understand how authoritarian regimes fall. So for me, I thought, well, let's just do this story time. So I'm really delighted that the podcast found you, because I didn't know. I sometimes feel like I am shouting into the void. And so it is so good to hear that it not only that it reached you, but that you found it effective. There's another episode of that coming out. I just have to do the show notes on it because I'm
Yeah.
trying to cite my sources. But yeah, I'm just going to read the whole darn thing so that people can understand the baseline. Because once we understand what's happening
Yeah.
and we understand a baseline like sheet music, we can all move together. And I think we'll feel a lot more agency. So yeah,
Yes.
that's a long ass answer to your question. How did you receive it? What's something that for folks who haven't like listened or taken it in, what was something that really stood out to you that you wanted to talk about that maybe was surprising?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say it's like sometimes the universe just gives me the thing I need to hear right when I need to hear it, and it's been on my mind. Kryn Johansson was talking about it too, because there's this temptation. I know everybody feels this temptation. You're seeing, and it's like we are looking at people abusing little kids, you know? And
Mhm.
so there's a natural impulse to be like, that has to just stop. But
Yes.
but we have there's so many ways we can do things because it's not I'm not looking out my window and seeing people abuse kids right in this moment, right? So right now I can do other things. And I think it's really important just to come up with ideas and examples for everybody here watching that what would people can do to feel more empowered. And I do have an example because listening to your talk gave me an example of something that I did the other day, which fit right in, which is something we need to do. And it is my daughter took, right after Renee Good was murdered, there was just some hints that there was going to be some violence coming to our area because we're very close to Minneapolis. And so we kept our kids home from school for one day. And one of my daughter's teachers, kind of understanding what was going on, she she handed out the card, like the Know Your Rights card to the class.
Mhm.
Well, of course, one of the parents who was MAGA flipped out, and then he called up the principal. And so all this was kind of coming down right. Like he called up the principal and the superintendent and all the members because he got so mad about this. And his lines too, where it's like, "You're gonna get those kids killed," like this. Just, but what occurred to me is we let them do that, right? I mean, the left obeys this, like, "Oh, we're never allowed to talk about like, there's a mass shooting. Maybe we should talk about gun rights." Well, now's not the time. They lecture us. Every time we try to do our activism, engage in our activism, they have some means of deflecting it. Well, now's not the time. Oh, I appreciate your cause, but not the words you're using. Like this endless sequence of things that make us not do anything to the point
Mhm.
where we're just like, well, I guess we should just do nothing. And what I did, my daughter told me this. I dropped her off from school. I was out driving, and I'm just like, what can I do? Because I was so angry about this father writing in. So I said, you know what? I'll write in. I'll write into the teacher and I'll say, thank you. Thank you for being a good teacher. And thank you for teaching about the Constitution. And I'll write the principal and I'll write the superintendent. Because it occurred to me, the right wing and Christian nationalists that's a synonym for white supremacists. It's a synonym for the KKK. It's all the same kind of thing. They're constantly out there telling the rest of us, you guys can't do anything, while behind the scenes they're making calls, they're pressuring people. And so this became like a case study because I sent the teacher this message. She sent me a message later that day saying, "I feel so seen. Thank you so much for sending this." And then she sent me a text message after that and she says, "Your message was what gave me the strength to go into school today." And yes, please everybody, consider this. I mean, whether you have kids in school or whether you don't, write the schools and say, don't indoctrinate our kids with white supremacy. Make sure you teach LGBTQ plus content. Don't censor that. Make sure you teach real history, not sanitized white supremacy history. Because you know damn well the radical right is doing this and they're censoring books and they're censoring the textbooks. And I always have been saying, or what I've kind of figured out over the last year is this white supremacy movement targets kids. Because if you try to tell that nonsense to adults, if you try to tell it to adults, I'm like, get out of here with that bullshit. You're not better than anybody because of the way you look. Get out of here. But they target kids because kids their brains haven't formed yet. And they haven't had the experience to recognize and they also want to please authority. So they're super vulnerable. So yeah, be involved. I mean, it's a really big thing to be involved at your schools. Praise the good teachers because I'm no longer a teacher, and part of it is because of that, the overwhelming pressure when you're trying to do the good thing. So we have to
Oh,
take that fight and be more active, but it's positive. It's a positive thing. Just support teachers. That's a major thing you can do right now. Go ahead and
yeah. Oh my gosh. That is a major thing. And I also want to add too that it's really important if you have children who are in college or even if they're approaching college age. So if they're in high school and your kid is interested in a range of schools, especially if they're your local schools, to write into the board of trustees, to write into the university president, and to also write into that student newspaper associated with that and say, hey, I am a prospective a parent who is going to be subsidizing potentially my kids' survival and being able to take part in college. And I want you to know that we are going to be very choosy about where we send our kids. And that's really important right now. And I say this as a community college professor because colleges are feeling the pinch in funding and they are very right now, the reason why they've slobbered all over Trump's ring, many of them, is because they're very sensitive to the fear of losing funding. But when you tell them that they can have all the fucking funding they want, but you're not going to send your kid to a place where they are going to be with like complicit educators, because it's not the educators, it is the administration. So it's the trustees, it's the university president, and it's like the sort of deanlets, the little circle of deans that are like, now, and provosts, now we are going to pass along to you how you're going to sell out your soul and pretend that it's not happening, right? So like at my own
Ah,
university in Ohio, there was a law passed that said, one, that we weren't allowed to teach controversial material. That includes women's studies and critical race studies.
God. Yeah.
So we would be investigated for saying, the bad things, and also that there was a requirement that there is an AI class, which is to prop up the AI bubble, and then also to teach a civics class. And you know that the civics class is going to be very specific, right? And so you're right. I love that you said the thing about how they focus on young people. And part of the reason, yeah, that they do that, you're right. When you say their brains are not fully developed, like for folks that are like needing more substantive, like people's prefrontal cortices do not develop until their early 20s. And so their sense of discernment and ability to emotionally regulate does not really kick in. And also because children's survival hinges upon the kindness and care of adults, their entire survival hinges upon obedience. And so they have a trapped audience.
Mhm.
So yeah, one thing that I would add is if this continues, because this may escalate. I mean, I do think we should always show support to the people who care. I would, my God, I if I heard from parents that they were proud of what I was doing in spite of like everything that I'm going through with the federal lawsuit to protect trans students, I would feel so galvanized if I heard from parents who were at my university. But like, yeah, like I guess that's the thing is support teachers, but also understand this. This is a moment to create parallel educational systems. There's a reason why Christian nationalists homeschooled their kids. And it was because they wanted to indoctrinate them.
Mhm.
And they knew that if they allowed their children to play with other children and to learn alongside other children who were different than them, that they would lose their audience entirely.
Mhm.
I mean, I think about Monty Mater. Are you familiar with her work? She
Nope.
is, oh my God, she's great. She's got like a rock and roll band. She's a former Christian nationalist all the way through college, went to Liberty University. And she's like, "Look, this is indoctrination, and this is what they teach you." And I love her work. But yeah, there's a reason why they're going after young people, and I think that we, as adults, if we move from this sense of, "Oh, this sucks. What's the next thing that Trump is doing?" and how do we respond with anger and shout? We could be like, "Okay, this is happening. This is the battlefield.
Yes.
These are the ways that they're supporting us, or sorry, attacking us, and let's plan." Right? And so that is, to me, the thing that is so important. So even understanding parallel educational systems may be very important, and also creating, especially for young people and for artists who are into pro democracy, develop and build in learning into the things that you do to make education around critical issues um, edgy and fun again. I mean,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is a risk, right? Well, like that
Yes.
when you take something away from kids, they're gonna want it more. And we need to find that seam and keep pressing it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Hi, Melissa. I see Melissa's here, and she says she's gotten into fights for because she calls it indoctrination. And yeah, I mean, thank you for your. I mean, you were using like the developmental language to discuss this, and this is just kind of something I've kind of intuitively seen. But the reality of what is going on, and I keep trying to change people's focus. She's like the guy in the White House isn't the issue. I mean, he's a symptom of an underlying disease, and everything that you've said, like calling like real history as a controversial topic. and calling women's rights as and that's just been established now. And that's what we have to work against. And this is why it gets really, really difficult. Like our side gets difficult because you'll come across people that have been so indoctrinated by this and they've gone through this system. It's like, well, that causes some controversy to say these things. And it's like, the facts are not controversial. I had somebody the other day and they just kind of said, even though what you're saying is true, it's kind of divisive. And I'm just like, so I shouldn't say the truth because it might, make some people angry. It's like, that's a problem. And it is really interesting. We'll meet adults who have been, and they're just, I mean, people are just trying to keep their head down and to avoid trouble. And I mean, some of them are good people, but they don't realize that if you're not, resisting your children being propagandized, you're surrendering them. You're going to invite trouble into your life. We're seeing that happen. So we do have to have this program of waking people up, but insisting, yes, that these things are taught in our schools, that the truth is taught, and just letting these go because we've already know the right, all they do is tell us to be quiet, and then at the same time, they're out there putting pressure on all these institutions. And for some reason, we comply with that. Why are we complying? And so then the only thing that's left for us is frustration. But keep in mind, the right permits us to be frustrated, right? They permit that. What they don't want us to do is just have polite conversations at school board meetings where we say, you know what, I actually want to teach that the United States is guilty of genocide and that there were birthing centers where women were raped to keep the slaves population alive after the slave trade was ended, and that Thomas Jefferson raped a black child, and all these, just say these things at like school board meetings. Because I want to say one example. Yesterday I was out skiing and I saw a friend of mine and I just started talking. He's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of sick of having child rapists tell me what to do." And I could tell another guy was walking. I said it really loud. And this is sort of I
Good,
put myself,
good.
yes, and that's great to get that feedback because I put myself in these kind of thought experiments, and sometimes it's really not a conscious effort. I'm just saying it loud, like as I get, I'm like, I want to talk about. It's like, why are you guys just standing around? Don't you see what's happening? And then you're sort of like, it's like easy to be dismissed, but we're all conditioned to dismiss people who tell things like that, who start sounding the alarm. It's like, get out of this building, it's on fire. People are like, who's that crazy guy? Be quiet. So I said that. I'm like, I'm sick of having child rapists tell me what to do. And I was looking at him, he was looking past me, and I think somebody walked by, and based on my friend's expression, he kind of got like the guy must have been making Scott Jennings faces, like. So I just started saying, yeah, every time I go out, as my kids are targeted, for extermination by the U.S. government. I'm just being loud, and I could tell it made my friend a little uncomfortable, and that just kind of helped me gauge because here on Substack, I'm talking to a lot of people like you who are awakened to the reality. And this friend of mine, his son had gone to the demonstrations in Minneapolis. So it's not like he was not part of this. But even so, I could tell he was like, maybe now's not the time. And it's like, push off that conditioning. Now is the time. If not now, when? We got to do it now. And it's like, and don't obey that white supremacy conditioning. I keep saying that. We're all indoctrinated with it. I am too. And it's what makes you inclined to not speak out when you should be speaking out and to say things you have absolutely every right to say. And it's what's keeping you from calling up your school and saying, thank you for being a good teacher. Thank you for being a good principal. Thank you for teaching the truth. And we have to, that's where the battle is. It's here first. It's in here first. And once we get activated, there's no, like you say, because there's so much we can do. And it's like right now, yeah, the right wants, hey, Dana, and it's like the right wants to push into that belief that our only thing is frustration. And then that's going to make us eventually do something reckless. But even, you're seeing that human beings are not inclined to just shoot each other. I mean, we are seeing examples of it, but consider how many days of this conflict has gone on. And, they're violent, they're pushing each other around. But there is a deeply rooted part of us that doesn't want to kill each other. And that's even true of the people that are most indoctrinated with white supremacy. And we can get through to them. But yeah, if it just becomes this free for all of violence, that's the end. And the other side's going to win. So the longer we prevent that, the longer, we keep our chances and our hope alive. And it's also being true to our own internal integrity.
Yeah, I love. So listen, I love what you said about and this really. First of all, say it loud. Yes, especially if you are somebody who has reputational um, advantage in a situation, because you're using your privilege, you're mobilizing your privilege as a white man to say, "Hey, listen." I'm going to be a little uncomfortable in public and say things that cause discomfort. But I want to back up even before that because you said something that is a question that I think that we need to like all of us sit with, even here on the call, which is why am I complying? Because you talk about something which is that that we don't often talk about, which is that white supremacy culture conditions all of us into polite silence and says that the moment that we say something that makes another person uncomfortable, that that is a form of violence when wherein they are also creating spaces where they're saying trans people are delusional and that queer people should be incarcerated again and that black people are born criminals. I mean, just fill in the freaking blank in terms of the
Yes.
things that they say out loud while calling your ability to point out reality of what's happening in schools as divisive. And I think a central question to ask is when they say that is, what's your vision of community and who counts in it? Just like that, very direct. And I would say it with a sense of curiosity, but be like, I too value this idea of inclusiveness, and I'm saying it in that spirit. So I wonder, what does your view of community look like, and who belongs and who doesn't? But another thing that you said that was so important. This question was, why are we complying? And I actually want to recommend something, though you don't have to, but there is this, book I know, I'm always gonna say there is this book,
Oh,
but I
it's
read
okay.
it, so I'm gonna do the synopsis, but it's called The Behavioral Ops Manual, and it was
Okay.
written by someone who was formerly, in intelligence, and it talks about the ways that, people in intelligence manipulate people to do things they would not otherwise do, including committing violence and such. And one of the things that they talk about is that if they can keep a person in their amygdala, which is kind of like right down by the base of your skull for folks that don't
Fear, yeah.
so when you're there, it actually when you're in your amygdala, you cannot also simultaneously be in your prefrontal cortex. And so when people are complying, it is usually for a couple of reasons. One, we assume that a uniform or a position of authority must always be obeyed. It's part of our kind of like lizard brain thinking. Don't question the leader. But the other thing that you'll probably see is that when people, I don't know if you felt this when that person said, "Oh, I think you're being divisive." If you felt this like sense of discomfort, it's usually because they're being aggressive to you in the way that they say it. And the reason why they're doing that is to get you in your amygdala so that you can't really respond from a prefrontal cortex place. And so most of us, when we're intimidated, shut down and become smaller. It's actually it's don't beat yourself up. It's actually a survival response. But if you can recognize it, and you can be like, "Oh, wow, that's what's happening." There's this book that I'm reading called Your Resonant Self that talks about how the brain works. And one of the things that she says is if you do like a figure four and you put your, yeah, this thing right here, and you think about it as your brain. This is your amygdala, right? This is your prefrontal cortex. And even if you just do this sort of embodied thing like this, you're like, oh, they're trying to hijack my amygdala. My gosh.
Mhm.
And just doing that one thing helps you, I think, get into a space where you can respond and you can be like, oh, I'm being manipulated right now. My God. So I don't know if that's any helpful to anybody, but like I
That's
just
super
wanted to
interesting.
like yeah, so just some fun brain science to help us get out of that because we are intentionally trying to be forced into our amygdala so that we cannot plan and we can't think ahead and we can't even recognize that we are being manipulated to comply, even as people are being lawless and breaking, just being cruel and violent. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, and it's interesting that you say that because something, and it's you're another one of these people. I was telling this to Nick because Rachel from This Woman Votes, she always has these great analytical responses to some of the stuff I write, and it's sort of like watching somebody come up the other side of the mountain from where I came up, and it's just like telling me about. It's like, oh my gosh, all the things you observed on because it's like a different path, but we're at the same spot now, and
Yeah.
just the things that they saw helped me see all these other things. And I found that lately I've just been identifying the tactics of white supremacy and like rhetorical tactics. And one of them is like, not all men. And every time I see that, it's like, oh, that's just a rhetorical tactic. You just want me. And it's like, it comes up in all these things. And what's scary about it, and I want all the people watching to understand liberals do this as much as the right does. They're just as inclined to do this. We're all right because the story I was writing about was kind of like, is Adam Kinzinger really on our side? Based on his calling the invasion of Venezuela the right call and a couple other things. And he was more mad about the use of the word fuck than he was that the woman Renee Good got shot in the face. And I got so many people that would have otherwise been liberal people. They're like, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm like, that's a that's not a real statement. That's so vague. And it's like every time people use these white supremacy catchphrases, it's designed to camouflage, the encroachments of white supremacy. Let's not talk about, and that goes back to what I said before. Now's not the time, let's not talk about how bad a person Charlie Kirk was because he just got shot. It's like, well, that's it, all I'm doing is saying the things that he already said. Just because some other conservative assassinated him doesn't mean that he's, all of a sudden he didn't say these things. And it's just all these different tactics. And like you said, I have felt like on an internal level, once I start reading these comments in terms of, oh, that's white supremacy rhetoric, it changes how I read these comments. Because yes, they always start out with an insult. I've had all these people like, you sound MAGA. So it's like, okay, attacking me that way. I'm like, okay, you're just trying to provoke me now. So I'm seeing that. And I'll tell everybody, because you all have experienced this. If you watched Scott Jennings or whatever on CNN with his resting white supremacy face, and you just get, because he's just sitting there like he's just giving you these smug looks and everything he says. I'm glad to get a laugh out of you. Let's laugh. We have to laugh. But if you've seen that, it makes you frustrated. But when you recognize, oh, he's doing that to try and provoke this reaction from me, and then it's like, oh, now it has no more effect. So we have to teach that to our children and our partners and our friends and everybody. And it gets so much easier once you start seeing it and you recognize that's a generalization. Yeah, that's one of those, they're called thought terminating cliches. They say an ambiguous phrase that sounds more or less reasonable, so that if you disagree with it, you are instantly pushed into that category of unreasonable. And the same thing, they do the same thing. And I'm even finding this now because I'm kind of getting hysterical in public. And I recognize, and this is a matter of privilege too, because generally, like, if a woman starts rightfully screaming about something, she gets dismissed as being too emotional. So it's like,
Yeah.
God damn it, I'll scream then. I'm a 50-year-old white man. I'll scream. And I'm finding what I'm finding that people are getting a little dismissive of me. So I'm kind of falling into that category where I'm triggering their white supremacy conditioning, even among like liberal people. And so this is where our battle is. And we have to get those people on our side, make them understand how their brains are not in their control, exactly as you've been saying.
Right, right. I mean, even Bob Marley told us this: free yourself from mental slavery, right? And what he really meant by that is how all of us have been conditioned in white supremacy, right? And it is true that even if you consider yourself a good white person, that even the thing to understand about white supremacy is it is not simply about the bigoted things that people say, but it's about structures and also uh, social mores that include the assumption that you cannot angrily denounce things that are harmful, and that is seen as unprofessional and impolite and divisive, right? And all of that is part of white supremacy culture. And also because of that, because we've all been trained in white supremacy culture as now, let's all get along. They do that to
Mhm.
silence dissent. And we actually train and reward people, especially folks who have white skin privilege or who are racialized as white. Um, that our job is to go and gather up those people and tell them they're being unreasonable and silence them. And we call it peacekeeping, right? Keeping the peace. And what we're actually doing is subduing dissent. And I think it's because white supremacy is afraid of conflict, because conflict leads, by which I mean an exchange of ideas. They cannot match us when it comes to the morality and the logic and the benefits of getting along together, because what they are doing is profoundly corrupt and is frankly social suicide, right?
Mhm.
um, and also, like, white supremacy is very afraid of emotions. I mean, to live in white supremacy culture, how many times, just from anyone on this call, have you been told to set aside your emotions? The only reason why people ask you to set aside your emotions is so you also set aside your discernment. Because once you associate professionalism with setting aside your emotions, then you're not using your emotions to guide your discernment. And you've got all of this data. And what you're going to do is what people tell you to do or what people have always done. And so there's a reason why you are seeing right now the thing about toxic empathy that's coming out of white supremacy and Christian nationalist cultures. Descent Bloom just wrote this awesome piece about that. I highly recommend folks check it out. But I think that the reason why they're doing that is a different kind of Darvo, right? Because what they really don't want you to look at is toxic white supremacy and its derivatives like toxic masculinity, right? So they're really trying to problematize people from accessing their emotions, not because there's something wrong with them, but because there's something very right with them.
Yes,
And they don't
yes,
want people to
yes,
access their discernment.
yes, and y what they hate is that in the legal terms, it's the process of discovery when it's like, "Okay, let's actually get all the evidence and look through it." No, they don't want that at all, so it's the constant deflection, and, like K Caroline Levitt, when when she says, the other day, somebody just asked her a completely innocent question and she just flipped out, and it's just like, how dare you ask that question? And then we've all been trained and conditioned to respond to her hostility. And a lot of what's going on here, I think, it's going to take longer for most men to figure this out. Women understand this because every single woman has been in just a narcissistic, abusive relationship. 100% of them have. So they recognize all these tactics and strategies that are used, and it's so manipulative, as you said, but it's also based on this structure that has been existent in this country for hundreds of years. I mean, you mentioned the lizard brain thing, like Stanley Milgram's obedience to authority. But I mean, if you did that with another culture that's not indoctrinated with white supremacy like the United States is, you might get a different result. And I think we assume that this is human nature. And this is what I keep telling people. It's like all of your assumptions about human nature they've become toxic because the Darvo effect again, or every accusation is a confession. The white supremacy culture tries to insist all of humanity is corrupt to hide their own corruption. And the reality is that some of us are good people. We just haven't we have to be quiet. And like you said, we have to just enjoy. Well, that's just the way of things. That's just the way it is. It's always been like that. All these phrases are just complete bullshit. And the more we get into it and we learn and we teach ourselves this language, it's more like we also all have to really understand we have to do more than just it's not just winning the midterms, and it's not just win the primaries first. Those are coming up. Get rid of all the worthless guys that are in there. But we have to completely dismantle the structure of white supremacy that's indoctrinating and grooming our children at the youngest. I mean, and they're not bad people doing it. That's the other thing. They're just people that think this is the way it always has been. This is our culture, our venerated traditions. We just have to preserve our way of life. People have to acclimate to the way we do things. All that's white supremacy, all of that. And so that's the thing that once you get people to kind of understand that, because it seems ridiculous actually, but just how big this problem really is, it's like, but what else is there? Try to figure it out. The guy is clearly the worst human being who ever lived, and tens of millions of people. I still think he cheated because another thing about white supremacists is that they always cheat. But still,
Always.
there were tens of millions of people who voted for him, and we have to reprogram them. We have to decondition them. That's our job now. It's going to be our job until the end of our lives because this is going to take a long time. But it starts with recognizing it first, recognizing the symptoms and the tactics, because like you said, it'll give you more control of yourself. You'll feel more empowered. But then bit by bit, as we get more and more people in our communities, so then our communities start voting for things that are more positive. We're talking about generational change, but this is the tactic. This is the strategy of the work, not violence. Violence will not.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to amplify something that you have been saying. And you mentioned in some of the phrases that you just used that people use to kind of convince themselves to become smaller, is that notion of a thought stopping exercise. And it can be things like, well, it's always been this way. We need to be polite. Now it's the Democrats who corporate Democrats
Mhm.
are saying things like, now we have to have a big tent, right? That's a thought stopping
Yeah,
exercise.
yeah.
But another thing that I wanted to mention that's also a thought stopping exercise, and you may start to see it in chats like this, are individuals who come in and type in nonsense in the chat that doesn't make any kind of sense. And the reason for that actually is because it creates a thought stopping exercise to do that, because you start being like, no, what in the hell? And then you get diverted from your
Mhm.
actual thinking. It's true. Like if someone were to confront you, like another thing that like if but you can also use it. I also want to point out you can also use it for good. So that if somebody tries to say something nasty to you in the comments or whatever and you want to engage, I just delete them. But
Yeah.
you could say something like, "Isn't it a lovely rainy Tuesday?" And it could be Friday night and it could be sunny outside, but the whole point is that you can use that same sort of mechanism against them. Because you don't have to engage with the shitty stuff they say. And if you want to engage at all, it is good to use their own strategies against them. So,
Yeah, and it's just everywhere too, and it's like so many comments are bots, but what I'm finding more these days is that, yeah, it's once you identify something is somebody is a human being and not a bot, it's like it becomes frustrating, and just it's been this year-long process of kind of working through all these different strategies.
yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't wanna see it either. I mean, I was just like anybody else. I just wanted to get Kamala in, and I was working 100% behind that, and it's like but I think, we've ripped the Band-Aid off, we've ripped off the blinder, and we're seeing this task before us now, and I know this last year it's been a huge exercise in learning the true ugly reality of the United States, but it is empowering too, and it is important, so hopefully this is the extinction burst of white supremacy, what we're going through. It's not gonna be fast, though.
No, on average, according to Peter Ackerman, it takes at least 3 years for a nonviolent movement to oust its tyrant. And the good news is that once you start reading and learning about how authoritarianism works and you can understand how to strategize, you're going to start to recognize we're already doing some of that stuff. What we need to do is find a way to develop uh, I mean, I use a flower as an example, but we need to have a way that people are doing their own little thing, but they're also they know that they're moving as a hive that have different jobs. And I want us to all manifest getting there, and that work not be first is the emotional work, like Walt is saying, but the next part is the interpersonal work that begins actually at the pre-electoral level, right? In your local, yeah, areas. Yeah, and that's tough, right? Because right now their fascists' main asset is scaring us. Once we are no longer scared, they lose.
Yeah.
So it's a project, that is both internal and social, because we also have to help each other not be afraid. What you did with that teacher, when
Oh,
you wrote
it
to her,
yeah.
it it really did. I am sure I don't think that people understand how helpful it is when you see something that makes an impact to tell somebody that it makes an impact, because you could be they could be on the verge of quitting
Mhm.
and your words help them keep going. And I don't think that we recognize that enough. Yeah.
I think we're deliberately conditioned not to do that, I think it's part of the whole system that we're inclined not to support each other, and it's gotten worse and worse since social media, and so,
Oh
I
my
mean,
god.
everybody does have to recognize that they've been the target of this malicious conditioning for their whole life. Your whole life's been
Yeah.
that way, and that's why, when I'm talking with Will Fullwood, he always says, it's like, "Let's just act in accordance with our own sense of integrity for a change and make that deliberate choice." But I mean, it's not like it's easy either. I mean, as we talk about this and some of these things, I just want everybody to kind of be excited about things you can try because what we were talking about, these positive actions where you're saying nice things to people. Another one I did today, I was I wrote my article about because I wrote my article about local police forces. And it's like it's not like I've never gotten into trouble with the police. I've had a couple minor traffic things, but it's like nobody's really excited about the police force, right? But the reality is, how are they feeling, because they're getting stuck in it's like they're getting stuck in armed conflicts with ICE too. ICE is getting paid all this ridiculous amount of money Even though the police forces did things the right way and did all the training and they meticulously went through. But the other thing that's important about local police is their kids go to the same school as your kid. So go to your local police officer and say, "Hey, are you worried that if they come into the police to take away those kids, like even if they're just radical right wing, you say, aren't you worried that if they go to the school and they take away these kids, they might knock down your kid or hurt your kid too?" I've been putting things in like this. I've just been telling people it's like I don't think if you release the videos of the president raping children, I don't think his base will leave him. And so you kind of, so I think they don't care about that. And you make people get into that conversation. So you're not arguing, you're not making an argument about whether or not he did it because they'll just say, no, he didn't do it. But now you're saying, no, from what I've seen, his base will not be disgusted by the idea of him raping children. So then they have to well, they will, then they have to say something where they get their humanity engaged again. And just, yeah, the structure of so many of our conversations, even those of us who think and I think I'm pretty intelligent, but I fall into these same indoctrinated responses to everything all the time. And another one of them is the Democrats keep saying the midterms when there's so much you could do right now. And that telling us, oh, just, don't do anything. We'll just wait till the midterms. It's like, that's white supremacy and conditioning again, because we have to do the groundwork, boots on the ground, to make sure people recognize what's happening and they vote appropriately. But it's to so much of an extent the Democrats are doing that. And so it's, yeah, part of our pressure tactics, or when we're calling up, we shouldn't just complain about the things that ICE is doing. We should complain about the things that our Democratic representatives aren't doing. Like, they should all be in Minneapolis right now, videotaping and documenting what's happening so that they can make a reasonable vote on ICE later on when that comes up. And we do have to pressure them to do it. But like you said, there's so many other positive things we can do.
Oh, for sure. And I wanted to mention something. You mentioned law enforcement, and according to Peter Ackerman's checklist to end tyranny, you do have to get some of the security forces to stand down. And in this case, it's going to be your local precinct, your sheriff's office, your National Guard, and potentially some people in the military. And I am not saying that. And then there are, I think, some people. There was an author who mentioned that some people might be. I I'm saying this with a lot of anger, but so just know that that some people might be persuaded to join ICE who don't necessarily agree with stuff, but just want money. I personally think that if that's the case, then money really is the root of all evil, isn't it? But the
Yeah.
thing is, you have to persuade the law enforcement, and Walt is right that one of the ways that you do that is reminding them that they are part of a neighborhood. And you mentioned the thing about, do you not want do you want to make sure that your children don't get harmed too? And it is true that that is the case. But another thing that it would be so powerful, and I think a lot of parents, especially if you are a white parent, it can be really, really tempting to say, I don't want my kids to know about what's happening. And you're protecting your children, your white children, from knowing about fascism while it is happening, which then leads them to be open to indoctrination in the first place. Trans children and Black children and brown children and immigrant children and autistic children cannot be shielded from this moment.
Yeah.
They are absolutely targeted by this situation. And so it is incumbent on parents to share that information, but to do it while sharing their kids a sense of agency. And a powerful way to do that is to ask to do things like this: have kids choirs singing songs outside of police stations, having little young kids do drawings of democracy art and mailing
Yeah.
it en masse to your local precinct, saying things like, I want to live in a democracy. Can you help me to make sure that happens? Because the thing is that many people get forced into their amygdala and they think everyone is the enemy. But it is very
Yeah.
hard to see little kids as an enemy when they have a tactile piece of art that was mailed to them. I'm asking, just like we
Yes.
have kids write to Santa Claus, and I'm not saying that the cops are not have not been involved in a lot of violence, but it you also have to understand that two things can be true. That can be the case, and we also still need to persuade them.
Yes.
So, but I'm saying the technique of kids mailing those things en masse is a kind of protest that would really work, and especially because it resonates on an emotional level because they have kids. And
Mhm,
it's going to remind them of that. And it also is going to remind them of when they were kids and ask themselves, is this the world that I wanna leave for people?
mhm.
Because you are right that they were trained. I do think that training has increasingly become militarized to see civilians, even
Yeah,
in their own neighborhoods, as enemy combatants, but I still think that that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try that. I also wanna suggest too that beyond saying, like, nice things, there are actual things that you can be doing organizing in your communities. I know we're not necessarily talking about that today, but I would love to talk to you about
yeah,
ways to build, um, like nonviolent defensive strategies in your neighborhood that could help protect your neighbors from being disappeared to begin with.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I had to delete somebody from the chat, so I was a little distracted a minute ago, so I just wanted to say that. I don't know if I came across as distracted or not, but I did.
oh, oh,
Yeah.
what happened?
Oh, no, let's just leave it at that and just keep
Okay,
going. But,
okay,
but this thing you're saying too about writing letters, that's another just fun thing you can do with your kids too. Like sit down and have that, and that'll get. It's like, hey, will you send in messages? Please protect us. I'm a kid in this community, and that you can appeal to that part. I mean, yes, we have a lot of problems in law enforcement, but there are some good ones in there, and we if we can appeal to them. So they just remember, and I think a big thing too, because ICE has been scaring me. It's like it's this
yeah,
nameless force, nameless, faceless force, and what even ICE is forgetting, and like, because the whole strategy of violence is to think there's no consequences, like tomorrow won't ever come. And I think you were talking about that. They're stuck in this internal present because they're a bunch of drug addicts in charge of the country right now.
hmm
But the fact is, if you kill somebody, that's with you the rest of your life, even if you don't face legal accountability. If you do those things, it rots you, and it's just no matter where they are, if they fly into Minnesota and then they leave, they still have to go somewhere and sleep. They're still part of a community. They still have to use so they're still people, and we all share the same vulnerabilities. I mean, this belief that they tend to have that they're above the law, it's just it's a false thing. And reminding them of that, reminding them of all of our inherent vulnerabilities, I think is really important. And at least your local law enforcement, they have their names displayed and their faces, and you can pension, you know where they live. They live in your town. But another thing you mentioned that I want to address is that family meeting thing, because I think it was about Tuesday, because my kids didn't go on Thursday, and so then it was Tuesday, and we kind of had some brief talks about it, but it was just building. The stress was just kind of building there. And what happens is, not that we were necessarily trying to protect them from what's going on, but we didn't really sit down and have a family talk. And then it finally did kind of bubble over. Because if you just leave it, kids are there, creative kids, they're coming up with all these thoughts, and a lot of it feels like if they don't know the reality of the situation, there'll be a tendency to, because I think I was getting some of the blame, like, oh, daddy overreacted again to these things that are going on. And that's natural enough because I didn't do my job and sit down with them. So we sat down and we had a conversation, and they cried and I cried and my wife cried, and then we're just like, what are we going to do? It's like, but this is everything that's happening. This is why we're making these choices that we're making. This is what you can do. This is what we're going to do in the future. Because I mean, they're worried about so many things. They're worried about today. They're worried about maybe leaving all their friends behind. They're worried about what's going to happen to the dog if we have to leave the country. All these things. And we're just like, okay, let's just address all these issues. And yes, then it's like, and because if you're thinking to yourself that they're not equipped to talk about these hard issues, you're just fooling yourself. You're just leaving them, without any resources, and then they're just like rudderless, and they're coming up in their minds with all these horrible scenarios and possibilities. So it really is up to us to sit and have those talks with their families, because otherwise it's going to lead to frustration. It's going to lead to bickering. Your whole family will be less powerful then because you're resentful. And it's like, no, I mean, your teacher wasn't upset because of me. Your teacher's upset because the United States is being run by a white supremacy movement. And that means genocide, because they only want the white race. And so that's
correct.
what it is. And that's just the reality of things. I'm not exaggerating it. It's just that everybody in our community and the whole country has been brainwashed to not even recognize whites. I mean, the KKK has never been listed as a domestic terrorist group. Are you kidding me? That's absurd. Just mention that to people. People are like, yeah, that actually probably should. And it's just so it glances off people's brains. I'm talking to people. You mention white supremacy and they just gloss over. So that's
Oh,
what
yeah,
our yeah,
you're
that's what our
training.
job is. Get through to that.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things that you said that I think is so important that ICE also belongs to a community, this is another strategy. So there are two things. One, when you do talk to your children and you tell them about what's happening, something really awesome happens where you can, if you're pointing out young people's agency. Sorry, I said students because of my job, but if you
Yeah.
point out their agency, they start to be like, oh wow, there are things that I can do
Yes.
too.
Yes.
And even very little kids, like I said, the art sort of situation. The other thing is public art. I know that this is going to sound maybe woo woo to people, but I don't think that they understand why Donald Trump took over the Kennedy Center and why he's taking over
Mm,
creative outlets. And part of the reason for that is because fascism itself is really about a story, right?
yes.
And when we tell other stories, and we can tell stories through words, through music, through writing, through drawing, all this, that it offers people alternatives and it galvanizes them, but also reminds us of what is the best in us and the most vulnerable in us. So if adults wanted to create public murals right now all over their neighborhoods of just young kids' art,
Ah,
that could do something to people. It's gonna remind not only those ICE agents, but also the guard, the local police, and also the adults in general. There are children here, and I say this because if civil war breaks out, if which will turn it, as you're right, absolutely into a genocide because these are white Christian nationalists, and we have seen what religious ethno-state violence looks like, and it always goes into genocide and flattening cities. It's a my God, is a really terrible thing. But we really can stop this, but we have to stop being manipulated to freeze or to comply and
yes.
understand that we have more agency than just getting on the phone with
Yeah.
our Congress
Yes.
people.
And what you said before too, controlling that narrative. And I've been fighting with it. I think, it's been a long time coming. Have you noticed that every single movie that is released is some sort of variant on John Wick? And like that's the only
Mm.
kind of entertainment we can watch. It's like
Yes, I've noticed
500
that.
people getting shot in the head. And it's just like, really? Nobody else is writing any kind of script out there? I know for a fact they are because all my writer friends are out there. And they all, when they send their stuff in, they get the same form letter rejection that I've gotten 1,000 times. So it's sort of like it's corrupt. I mean, the oligarchs own all the newspapers, they own all publishing, they own all storytelling. We're not allowed to engage in these things. And yeah, instantly when I start talking like this, I get 100 people say, "Oh, Walter, you're just not good enough. It's just sour grapes." And it's like I've had pretty good evidence that I'm a pretty effective writer on a lot of different levels. And it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'll send in a thing saying I've got this huge following. I've made this much in the last couple of years independently writing with absolutely no resources. We're not interested in your book. How could that possibly be the case? It's like, and then people are saying, well, they're trying to pick what they think will make money. And I don't think they are because you see that white supremacy and hate groups have just limitless funds. I mean, we never talk about auditing the military budget, their $1 trillion military budget. The Pentagon can't pass. So all that money is being siphoned off. And one of the main things the right wing hate groups do is, oh, we can't have cancer resource because there's a lot of fraud there. We can't have Medicare because there's a lot of fraud there. So it's another everything they say is their confession. I think they're just channeling money from all these other sources all the time. This white supremacy administration is trying to fund white supremacy for the next 1,000 years by just,
Yes.
and so all these mediocre people like Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk, they get to sign $100 million contracts, even though nobody really wants to listen to them. Then they're shoved down our throats and we have no alternative. You drive around and you hear the same 20 songs every day because they've been the vetted ones that'll stop anybody from realizing, gee, life doesn't have to be shitty like this, and we just cut all that out. So, but that's kind of farther down the line. We'll start having great art, but make great art in your home, like our weirdo
Right.
friend said.
Yeah, and I also too like building parallel systems to share things like scripts and to share things like books and create publishing houses on our own.
Mm,
We can do this work. It doesn't, just like you were saying, you made so much money without any resources. I think that the oligarchs want you to think that you can't make movies and you can't do publishing without their blessing.
yes.
And the reason why I know this to be true is like somebody who belongs to the transgender community is that there has been very little interest in funding stories around trans stories. And so they have created their own little networks and also starting on YouTube. Although, honestly, I want to recommend, and I've said this so many times, please create a backup PeerTube account. Please, please, please. Because things, the algorithm is being weaponized against
What
us
was the
here.
name you
But
said?
it's PeerTube. It's basically a federated YouTube, but
Oh,
I highly recommend that people
EE?
start creating like backup social media accounts. Yeah, I got a lot to say about the things that we can do, but
Oh, yeah.
the cool thing is that we can make money and we can fund art, even the art that we're craving from adults that we're not getting. You are absolutely right about the funding of violence. It's intentional and it helps numb people in white supremacy culture to the violence that they encounter. So I'm so glad that you said that. And if I see another damn John Wick movie, and I haven't I was introduced to them this summer by force. I walked away, like, there was this moment where, an animal gets killed, and the person who was watching it with me just looks at me like, "It's not real." And I'm like, "Okay, it may not be real, but I am being asked to accept this form of violence as a form of entertainment, and my nervous system rejects that, and I am going to honor that by leaving the room."
Yeah, yeah. And all those pressures, and somebody just asked, "This is, your weirdo friend, you can find her here on Substack." But yeah, but all these pressures and just all the different ways. I was telling people, like, prior to the holiday season how there's so much pressure to just sit down and endure, like, your right-wing asshole uncle that is probably abusive, that everybody knows is abusive. I've got an idea for an article, I don't know if I wrote it down, but just, like, for a lot of these Republicans, getting ghosted is the first, dosage of accountability they've ever tasted, and that's why there's such a strong reaction. That's why I think it's so important, because there's just such this level of entitlement in that makes
Mhm.
these just the worst possible people in the world think they can behave however you want, and that you have somehow committed some unforgivable sin by just saying, "Look, could you not treat me like absolute shit all the time? Could you respect my humanity and my right to exist on this planet?" And it's just sort of like the fact that that statement is considered controversial and all these another example comes to mind at school the other day. How did it go? I think it was my seventh grader mentioned this, where they were just mentioning these ice raids, and one of the kids started to celebrate it in the classroom, and everybody just was kind of like, "Huh." And I could sense, my daughter told me this story in about 2 minutes, and I could sense that the teacher just felt, okay, I'm going to get in trouble if I start pushing back on this. But it's like, but on top of that, she's not allowed to say, well, you realize the president is an adjudicated rapist. You realize he's a 34-time convicted felon for election, business fraud related to election interference. You realize he was under investing. All these things are just factual. And you're not allowed to say those things. We're only allowed in public schools to teach the regime's narrative of what's going on in the world, and teachers know that they have to bite their tongue. And it's just sort of astounding, actually, that we have as much power still as we do, because you look around and you see how this mechanism is everywhere. It's infected absolutely everything. And still, in our deepest hearts, we know that everything is wrong. And we found this huge community, people willing to turn away from the media, and they're turning away. So it's like people know. And it's like, that's why we're going to win, because there's this essential understanding what is right and true, essential integrity. And we've not been allowed to just live with that. We're constantly under this absurd. What does it cost? How much does it cost to maintain this mechanism, to make us think it's wrong to treat our kids with kindness, and to pressure us to not speak our minds in situations, or even to send a thank you note to a teacher? How much does that propaganda cost? And what if we spent all that on healthcare and housing and all these other wonderful things, and education, all the things that we could have? So that's our mission statement. And
Yeah.
all it takes is like 3% of the population. Then it starts having the exponential expansion. So that's another thing I like to tell people, to give them some hope.
Yeah, yeah, Erica Chenoweth, had that, yeah, 3.5%, and the thing that she talks about is it's the observable tip of an iceberg, that
Mhm.
there is actually a larger group of people that are actively under that you can't see. And one of the things that she says is that not only do we need to learn how to engage in strategic nonviolence at the local level to succeed, but we can't keep on assuming that we can build our movements online, and we can't continue to just do protests because that's not enough. We need to like sequence our strategies. So she's
Yeah.
she's so effective. Or sorry, I don't. no Chenoweth pronouns. I need to maybe redouble on that. But my point is, Chenoweth is a great scholar, and I appreciate Chenoweth's work. But yeah, that 3.5% is so important. And friends, we are already doing this work, and the more you give yourself permission to speak out, it is going to give other people permission to speak out.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
important.
Yep, and I've been trying to because they do demonstrations in my community, but they just chant, like, "Ice must go." I'm just like, "Give me the microphone." I mean, we got all these people here. Let me talk for an hour. I could easily talk for an hour and just activate
Same.
people. Because just standing there saying, "No to ICE," it doesn't do much. I mean, and so much of the local groups are still organizing using corrupt social media accounts that suppress their content, and it's like, it just bothers me. It's so hard to get through to people too, where it's just like, you guys gotta be doing this, but we gotta just keep sharing. We can't get frustrated with each other. Keep sharing that information. We're getting there. And oh my
Oh,
goodness, I mean, it's been delightful to talk to you. We're at an hour. I don't know if you have other stuff to do.
yeah.
Gonna go a few more minutes. I'm fine. But if you want to
Yeah.
start to sell yourself a little bit, or
Oh,
have
golly.
some
Well,
thoughts,
yeah.
give some thoughts.
So my I'm on here as your weirdo friend. It's a nom de plume. And if in case you're wondering, it is first a deep cut reference to Muppet Family Christmas, where where Fozzie Bear's mom is like, "Here and your weirdo friends," and I just thought it was funny. Because when I read On Tyranny, one of the things that Timothy Schneider said was like, "Stand out." And I thought, well, I'm gonna make a name that is recognizable, and I also wanted to do it as your weirdo friend, so that when people referred to me, they'd say, "My weirdo friend." And it reminds people of something that white supremacy culture tries to tell you, not to engage with. They want you afraid of your authenticity. They want you afraid of your difference. They want you afraid of weirdness. And we all have this nostalgic view of Muppets and childhood and PBS. And I wanted people to tap into that to recognize, no, like, we're best when we embrace our weirdness and the whole ecosystem of how we show up in the world. And so it's an intentional thing, to remind people of their center, because I think all of us want to experience delight. And yeah, and white supremacy requires you to be a copy of a copy of a copy. You see this even with Pete Hegseth, you know,
Oh
when
gosh.
he's showing up, with his whole only Ken dolls, which is, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And
his whole
his
bot.
somebody needs to go through all of his tattoos too, because there's a lot of
Yeah,
dog whistles to just blatant white supremacy on his that I've seen. I've got to
and
verify.
bullhorn. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
and they used to always call me weird when I was growing up. I went to this conservative small town. It was just like, so weirdo has always been like a nice word for me, but it's just sort of like. And then you mentioned the Muppets. Just the other day, I turned on the old one with Mark Hamill from The Empire Strikes Back. So we were like,
yeah.
the kids weren't all that impressed, but the Muppet Show is a nice way to just kind of relax. And it's you can find that out there. I
It
bought them
is.
all when the kids were growing up. So
Yeah, I bought the box set of The Muppet Show too, just because it was like one of my favorite things growing up. Alongside like other people, I think Melissa Corrigan has talked about this. When you're in a situation where you feel like there aren't safe spaces, sometimes you turn to public television, and I think that things like the Muppet Show and Mister Rogers, or Mister Dress Up if you're in Canada or whatever. All of these shows taught us a sense of wonder and possibility. And yet, as Laura's talking about, weird is good. And I think that those older shows kind of inspired us to be inventive. I think that what we call weird is actually the things that
yeah,
that the people in the dominant class don't want us to
yeah,
exhibit because they
or to
know it's more
fear.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I think that's lovely. And the other thing I've been doing to everybody to remind you of, we put forth our plan of no telephones after 5 o'clock, and it's just been unbelievably good for my mental health, just setting that thing down and just deliberately focusing with your family. And it's opened my eyes after doing it just for like 4 or 5 days, how much I was allowing that to distract me and it was hurting my family. So I mean, if you all are feeling stressed, just put your phones down for
Yeah.
after it's hard at this time, but just put it away. And it makes
I agree. Yeah, because what you find the next day will be there for you, right? And also the way that they're really controlling you and trying to psychologically break you is through everything you're seeing on your screen. So when you go
yes.
outside and you spend time with your family and your neighbors and yourself, you find that the reality they're trying to sell you doesn't exist in your neighborhood.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that two-screen thing does something bad to your brain where you're back and forth like this. I think it just because there's something too, like, getting into that dream state, that flow state where you're actually absorbed and engaged with other people and things, and our phones rob us of that, and it just hurts you on so many levels. It hurts your relationship, so and, like, what is the wo it's resistance is rest or rest is resistance. I keep forgetting the title of the book, but it's like, yes, people, give yourself a little bit of a moment. Don't feel like you have to fight white supremacy 24 hours a day. Take time to rest because we need it for the long haul. It's going to take the next 50 or 100 years of fighting. It's not going to be done, in they're not even talking about the primaries. We can completely retransform our government in the primaries if everybody goes out there, vote out all the guys that voted for, and this is just change them all. I mean, it's like we can change all of our representatives if we want to in these primaries. Democrats don't want you thinking about that, so we can do that too. But yeah, also get out, talk to your people, do positive activism, and it takes away so much of your frustration. But
Yeah, yeah.
let
Thank you.
yeah, I was gonna say it's been so much fun, and I feel like we have so much more to do. And yeah, well, I'll schedule you for some other talks. You have to come on with me and Nick. I think you've probably talked to him before, but the three of
Yeah,
us
I'd
do
love
our
to.
Tuesday talk. Yeah, and with
Yeah,
Will and everybody. So we'll make it happen. It's been a delight.
yeah, thank you so much, and everyone have a good day.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Love you all. See you next
Thank
time.
you.
Bye bye. Thank you.